Hey guys, this is Kenjiro and welcome to another PaintShop Pro video. So the other day I got a nice thank you card, and as I had put it on the counter, the light was shining through the top layer and creating this nice shadow cast pattern on the rainbow card, and I kind of thought to myself, oh, it'd be kind of neat to recreate this in PaintShop Pro. So um, wanted to give it a shot using a paintbrush and some vector graphics. So let's see how that'll come out. So to start off, we'll start with a blank canvas, and I'm just going to use white as a background. Next, we'll just select the standard paintbrush, and you can choose whatever pattern you like. I wanted to go for something that felt kind of like a paintbrush dab. I ended up choosing the cloud pattern. I can't remember if that's a built-in pattern or if that's one I ended up downloading from Brush Easy, but you can use whatever you like. It just depends on how much texture or what kind of look you want to have. So I'm going to speed up through the painting process as that takes a little while, and all I'm really doing is just randomly dabbing in different places, following the natural pattern of the rainbow, starting with like a light pink red and then making my way across the canvas, blending all the way to purple. And then at a certain point, I'll decrease the opacity and then do some sort of blending with that. Once again, this is just to create the background, so you can do whatever you like here. If you don't even want to do a rainbow but do a different color scheme, you can do that as well. But essentially, I was trying to match what the card was looking like, so this is how I kind of chose what I was going to do. So I got to a point where I kind of liked how the canvas looked, but I wanted to do a little bit more experimentation, so I duplicated that layer, and then I went and chose the smudge tool. And what I wanted to do with a really large size was just kind of brush around on this, and really what this is doing is kind of like smearing the color. So this removes the texture that kind of came with the brush, but it gives like sort of a swirly, cloudy, really more just a softer feel to it. But I preserved the previous one, that way we can see the differences between these different styles. Once again, this is just playing around and experimenting to see how things look, and then ultimately deciding what we like at the end. Okay, so now we have our final canvas, either the swirly one or the textured one. And what we're going to do is add a vector layer. And what I want to do now is draw the border, but I want to achieve this by first creating a rectangle that fills the scene and then cutting out the middle while still using vector graphics. So the way that this is done is once the rectangle is drawn, then we need to select it with the pick tool, right click, and then click convert to path. At this stage, we can select the pen tool and use the straight line drawing and start drawing that inner border, if you will, that's going to be the region that is cut out. Now, the way to ensure that these lines are drawn perfectly orthogonal is to hold shift each time you're clicking the next point. And as we reach the end, we want to create that point just shy of where it would actually connect. And then we want to zoom into that region. I'm having a little trouble here. But we want to zoom into that region and then very carefully join those points together. If they're not aligned perfectly, you can select each one and adjust it so that they align. But once they're lined up, then you can grab the end point and carefully drag it to the starting point. And at a certain key moment, the text on that end should say join, and when it does, if you release, then that'll be a single path, a connected path. Then you can right click on it, go to edit, and then say reverse contour, and what that essentially does now is it creates a line that's drawn the opposite way and therefore creates a hole in the place of that rectangle. So now we have our vector graphic border. So I want to add some text, but to make sure it doesn't get affected by the border I just created, I'm going to create a new vector layer. And I'm going to add the text. And then I'm going to spend a fair amount of time deciding on what font to use, but ultimately ending up with the one that I started with. And now I can find a preset vector graphic shape just to draw, and really placement of these in matching with the original card is just creating sort of those connection points. Like I'm trying to get the text to be connected to the border using all similar kinds of shapes. So all I'm doing is just making copies of this clover looking flower, resizing them and positioning them so I have a nice even distribution across the card, and that I've created connection points between the text and the border. So now that we have all of those in place, I can combine those two vector graphic layers by right-clicking on a layer and selecting merge down. And now those are all grouped together, and I can move them or I can make them invisible. And now I can check kind of the different looks of the different backgrounds along with that. And to get sort of the shadow effect that I was going for, instead of just a black overlay, we can decrease the opacity so that some of the color pattern underneath comes through. So now if we want to try something a little bit different, and we want to replicate the card with the cutout layer that was white, all we have to do is duplicate that layer, select everything, but not the background layer, select all the vector graphic objects, and then just change that color to white. And now it looks a lot more like the original card, not the shadow version of it. And if we want to emphasize that sort of separation between the cutout and the colored background, we can add a drop shadow, and I like to use a halo shadow, which, although it's not shown in the view, even though I selected my preset, it should be a shadow directly behind instead of off to the side. And then what that creates is a look like the white portion is actually hovering above the rainbow background. And so now, once again, we can play around with all the different combinations. We can turn the shadow on, we can change to the textured background, we can turn the white back on, and in any combination of these, whichever one we end up liking, that's the one we can keep. So in the end, summary, we just use the paintbrush tool with a particular textured brush just to create the rainbow background, created a vector graphic object for the border on the top, and then had to use a reverse contour to cut out the middle so that it ended up just being a border instead of a filled rectangle. And then just drew text and vector graphics to create the pattern. And then ultimately either change the opacity so that we could get that sort of shadow look, or used a layer property, layer effect of a drop shadow to create that cutout sort of hovering above the background effect. So in terms of what next, you can always leave questions or suggestions in the comments. If you like the content and you want to get updates of new stuff, you can always subscribe, and there will be a blog post eventually created for this, so that if you want to see it slower and at your own pace from a step-by-step written point of view, you can go there. And what's pretty common for a lot of YouTube channels, if they hit certain landmark numbers, some that come to mind are like 500,000 subscribers or 1 million subscribers, they usually do a shout out to their folks. And so I've hit one of those as well, so I just want to say to the 50 of you that are subscribers to the channel, this card is for you. See you guys next time.